Brothers and sisters, welcome back to another episode 2 of our visit to the New Berlin Volunteer Fire Department Museum. Today, I brought in some individuals that through the years were volunteers within the organization and went on to become career firefighters. The last one came on as a volunteer and retired as a chief of the career New Berlin Fire Department. So we're going to get a little history from them, but what I'd like to, I want everybody to understand that so many of us in the American Fire Service start in the volunteer companies and we move our way through. Some stay volunteers and they do an amazing job. I don't know if our listeners, I know that the brothers and sisters are aware of this, but we do have people that are not firefighters. Do you know that there's roughly 1.2 million firefighters in the United States, of which 1 million are in some capacity volunteers that are not career. So the reality is when you see a fire truck go down the street, there's a much greater chance that those are volunteers or paid on call, depending on what part of the country you're in, than career, because there just is not that many career firefighters. So with that being said, what I'd like to do is I'm going to ask all these gentlemen, because they've been here through different eras, what the department meant to them, what it meant in their start, and then basically what impact it had as they move forward in their careers. So our first guest today is David Johnson. You may have seen him before. He has been on the podcast. He is the assistant chief. What do they call it? Deputy chief of the Watertown Fire Department, which I know everybody loved because that was one of our best podcasts as far as people watching it. So Dave, welcome back. So give me an idea of what it was like when you started, how you found the fire department, how you got there, and then, what that influence had on your career.
Yeah, so I came on New Berlin in '86, and I didn't have a path. I didn't have a pedigree, so to speak, of fire service before me and my family. In fact, to the contrary, most of my family was in the law enforcement. And I thought that was my path, and I was just looking for something, but I didn't know what I was looking for, and I found your father. And I started in the '80s, and it was different. Like, it was immediately when you came in, there was a sense of belonging, there was a sense of service to the community. The community loved the fire department, and I think all of those things that came about really shaped who I became. Gave a sense of purpose. You talked about the difference between career and volunteers and I don't think any of us really knew we were volunteers. I mean, we probably knew because we didn't get paid for it, but our commitment in some cases were higher for what we provided to the community than maybe as some people as career people. And it's not a slam towards anybody either. It was just the culture that was here.
It wasn't, again, like I mentioned in the first episode, that a lot of the people that were at Station 5, where these guys were, for the most part, not all of them, but they were career firefighters in other places. So we really kind of had that base of what was expected of us. The expectations were presented, they were inspected, and then they were followed. So you obviously become a volunteer, and then you go to work where?
So we were in that time, and I know it's not this, that there were no jobs. There were no jobs in Wisconsin. I remember distinctively taking City of Brookfield's test. It must have been around 1989. And they opened up and they closed applications after 350. And we all showed up and we took the test and we did the physical agility for no jobs. It was an eligibility list. So I started testing out, and I ended up in the western suburbs of Chicago in a community called Lyle Wooders Fire District. And ironically, your dad knew the chief. In fact, I shared with you the letter your dad wrote to that chief because he knew Chief Paul Becker very well. And if you put the two of them together in the room, they were cut from the same cloth. So I went from a department where they were very community oriented and a high level of excellence and standards and training and innovative to a department that was the same thing south of the border.
So you did your career there?
I did my career 25 and a half years. I retired as a battalion chief and then came back home to Wisconsin, where I've been involved in free agency right now until my last day.
Excellent, excellent. So what impact do you think that being a volunteer had in your career, and more, I guess, specifically being a part of this fire department? How did that impact your career as you moved along?
I would say if I had to put one thing on there, it was the standard of excellence. And I said, we didn't know we were volunteers. We trained all the time. We looked to the future. We planned. We staffed. As we were waiting to meet with you and do this podcast, we were talking about the time where we would staff the station before sleep-ins and interns were a thing. And I remember distinctively, probably on several occasions, being scolded because we took in calls that we weren't doing.
That weren't ours. Yeah.
We hopped in and we did what was right. And they're like, no, can you even imagine? Like, don't go on that call in today's era, right? It was a thing. The standard of excellence, the service we provided the community, the selflessness and the sacrifice, right? It was just something that I think I took with me through my whole career and bring it forward now.
And if there was one thing you would owe that to, what do you think it is?
It was your dad. It was your father's leadership. Your dad gave vision and provided our mission and a forward momentum that not only impacted New Berlin, I'll go as far as saying it shaped the fire service in Waukesha County, as well as in the Midwest and probably the country.
Yeah, well, I will say that to boast a little bit, my father was, I think, one of the few volunteer fire chiefs. Even he was a paid administrator, so he was an actual paid chief, if you want to technically call it. But he ran a volunteer fire department and became the president of the Great Lakes Chiefs Association. So that was a pretty good accomplishment for a kid from Brooklyn. So. All right. Well, thanks, Dave. I really appreciate your input, and I thank you for coming here today. It really does mean something, and I think it really sets the tone for what we looked at in the first episode of what this department was and what it really meant to people. So next online, I have Mike Medrano. Mike was a I'll call it a Lisketeer. What did they call it?
Fire intern.
Fire intern.
West Dallas, West Milwaukee fire intern.
Okay, and that was what?
It was a program started by Jim Liska.
Hence why we called it Lisketeers.
Right. And he basically would recruit people within the West Milwaukee, West Dallas, and Hale to be a part of the program. And I think it was about 15 people every year that would be chosen to do it. And it was a program where we would leave school after lunch, senior year. Once you had all your requirements done, then you could be a part of this program. And we'd go to the West Milwaukee Firehouse, which is now occupied by Milwaukee. And the whole upstairs was our classroom. They had a room, and it was a classroom. And Jim taught us, like, this is what it means to be a firefighter. This is what you have to do. And so we went through basically everything of what the job was, and then if you're interested, this is how you proceed to pursue that career.
And how did you end up in New Berlin?
So I believe Jim was a lieutenant here and also taught at WCTC, and that's kind of the track he sent a lot of people on, is whatever community borders you and will take you on, get on a volunteer fire department and give of your time, and then get into a tech school and get your state certifications, level 1 and level 2 at the time. I think they even had level 3 at the time. Get your EMT license, go work for a private ambulance company. He kind of like
laid your path,
this is what you got to do. So myself and a bunch of my friends, we all joined, and the rest is history. Luckily, the chief at the time said, all right, we'll let you be a part of this, even though you're not living in this community, but you have to go to the trainings. You have to spend so much time at the firehouse. And then we were assigned gear and assigned an officer. And
so I will say that they were, as Dave said earlier, that they staffed the firehouse, and a lot of those guys that came out of the program in West Milwaukee and became volunteers here, young men striving to become career firefighters, they were the crews that would staff the firehouse. Now, there would be a senior officer or a driver that would be there with them, so it didn't just become a fraternity house. But they were there, and they were able to get an engine on the road quite often that had the same turnout time as a career job, even though we were volunteer, because we were on the road right away. So then you come on, you end up in the city of Milwaukee.
Yep. So like Dave was just saying, you just start testing everywhere. And so I did that. I tested all across the state. I did not venture outside of the state, but you see the same faces, like no matter where you were, La Crosse, Madison, Green Bay, everybody was there, and we were all competing for very minimal jobs. It was tough to get on back in that time, and tested in a lot of different places for a couple of years, and I ended up in Milwaukee.
I'm going to segue out for a minute, and the idea that, what do you think has changed? We have this problem finding firefighters that want to do this job anymore. We're finding young men and women that want to do this job. What do you think has changed from then to now?
Well, one thing I think is society has changed. And so to get people to sign up to be a police officer or a firefighter is the recruiting and retention is harder, because the trades provide a good pay, and people, even if you want to give back, you could become a teacher or a nurse if you like EMS. And so there's other avenues for people to give back and make a good wage. So society's changed, and the benefits of the trades have been, I think, increased. That's just maybe my opinion.
I think that's the eternal question, is try to figure out that answer, because we do have a retention and we have a recruitment problem, and they are two separate things. But it does seem that I would have given my eye teeth to be a firefighter. I would have done anything to be a firefighter. Right. And now they can't find, if there's 10 openings in a fire department, they get 9 applicants. Right. And I don't know what that is. Part of me thinks that it is because we've taken away some of the ideas, like Dave spoke earlier of, that it is providing for community. It is giving back to humanity. It is care for your fellow man. And it is something special. It is not something that everybody can do. This job is not for everybody. And I know I'll hear about it, but the reality is it's not for everybody. And this job requires some grit, and requires knowledge, and it requires really the ability to, as we are going to learn, tomorrow, this is recording on September 10th. So as you're going to learn that in September 11th, tomorrow, a lot of firefighters gave their lives, police officers gave their lives because they felt it was their duty. And they took an oath to do that. So I think we've changed some of it from that. From that is what is special about it. That's what makes a difference to, well, it's just a job you can do while you're in the process of going to nursing school or something else like that. Right. And takes away that sense, that human sense of we all want to belong to something, and we want to usually belong to something greater than self. So oddly enough, Mike, starting out as a volunteer, worked his way to fire captain in the city of Milwaukee and became
the union president.
The union president.
Which is pretty ironic, isn't it?
Which is very ironic.
Yeah. Going from doing it for free to pounding my fist at the table for wages, hours, and working conditions. Yeah.
Yep. I just think that's ironic.
I stop and laugh about it quite often.
That we literally did this because it was fun. I would argue, because Mike was part of union representation, as a chief, we would have discussions on, well, grieve me, grieve me, get all this other stuff that would go on, because he went to the position of looking out for wages, hours, and working conditions, looking out for his people. So, and I will say, Mike, you did a fantastic job with that. There might be others, just like people who didn't like me being a chief. There might be others that have a different opinion, but I know that Mike devoted his heart and soul to being Local 215 union president. So
whether it's a union leadership or a chief officer, isn't it funny how you walk into rooms now and some people will hug you and say, hey, it was great to see you. And then other people will turn and walk away and not say anything to you. So yeah, that's just part of leadership, right?
You are right. And the reality is this. if that happens, that means you've been doing things right, and that means you stood for something.
Yep.
And so much of society nowadays, I think, doesn't have the courage to stand for something.
Yeah.
And you can't change your beliefs. Your beliefs need to be the same. You can have different thoughts. You can rethink things, but your core beliefs are always going to be your core beliefs.
Right.
And if you shy from those and your action are not within the thoughts, if your actions are not in line with your core beliefs, then something's going wrong. You're doing something wrong.
Absolutely.
So what give me one takeaway from your time here as the volunteers that you feel encouraged or changed your path in the career service?
Well, I think it was being part of a community, and the community we had at Station 5 with 605 and 607, I think was amazing. Like it taught me a lot about the camaraderie in the firehouse, the teamwork, and the brotherhood and sisterhood of the job. And, coming in 18, 19 years old, only knowing what Jim taught us at West Milwaukee in the intern program, learning all of that, like really set me up for the rest of my career and what we were going to be, doing and working as a team and the camaraderie of it all.
I might say I might have hollered at Mike once or twice when he was a young man.
Yeah,
he had a little bit of a wild side on him that I had to kind of file the edges off.
Uh-huh.
But we all did when we were young.
Yeah. Well, that was good. I like to think that I made a lot of my mistakes early on, and I couldn't get fired. You could get let go from being a volunteer, and I know people that did, but I didn't lose my job. Correct. Right? So that was good.
Correct. Well, Mike, again, I'd like to thank you for your time. I really appreciate you coming in today. As we move down this line of people, you're going to see how it all comes together. Yep. What an amazing organization.
All the different stories too, right?
Correct.
Yep.
Michael Wise, you also came into the New Berlin Fire Department. You were, like myself, you were an Explorer Scout. That's how you started. And then again, continued on your career to become a City of Milwaukee firefighter.
Correct.
So, Mike, tell me how you got here.
1986, I was a sophomore in high school. Like Dave had said earlier, I really didn't have a career path. You're a sophomore in high school, you don't know what to do, but the counselors are telling you got to come up with something to do. And on a total fluke, a good friend of mine from 3rd grade through 6th grade, when we hit 7th grade, when we hit middle school, we split schools. So Paul Conway, who happened to be as an explorer,
who was supposed to be here today, Paul. So if you happen to watch this, thanks for stiffing us, buddy.
And I did text him. I haven't heard back from him. So Paul was an explorer, started just before me. And another friend of mine through high school one day said, hey, why don't you come and check out this explorer post? So it was a Monday night, which is when the whole fire department met and the explorers met. So I went up to the firehouse on a Monday night, walked in, and immediately fell in love with it. Just the culture, like Dave and Mike had talked about, the culture and everything that 5 had brought was phenomenal. And then who's standing before me but Paul Conway, who I had known and become really, really good friends with for 3 years. But because of middle school, we had sort of split. We really didn't talk much. And he sucked me in even further. So I started in 86, and I never left until I retired in 2021. So it was a phenomenal run. But that's how I ended up. I ended up there, was on a total fluke. A buddy of mine says, try this. And I still, to this day, that had to have been some sort of God's intervention, because I don't know where I would have ended up. I was not on a good path in high school at the time.
As many of us were.
So it was a true godsend. But that's how I ended up. And then went through the Explorer program. Somebody happened to be the post advisor. He can remain nameless, but he's probably standing right to my right. Instilled a lot of...
I don't know where this guy found all the time to do all these silly things, because it seems to be I was a lot of places. But anyway,
instilled a lot of the core beliefs and everything. And truly, I think the biggest thing in that age group is to instill the love of the job. Once you get into the tech schools and stuff, there's some technical things that you need to learn, but I think that junior fire program, that junior fire institute that Milwaukee's got, The Explorer program is phenomenal in some of the recruitment, in get younger people to fall in love with the job early. It worked for me, and I stayed.
So I will say that, and you did end up moving on to be a city firefighter. And for those of you who know, you've seen Mike on the podcast also. He was one of our original people. Mike was and became the senior man for the city of Milwaukee and did your last 5 years at the school?
4.5.
4.5 years at the school in our training academy, teaching young minds and molding them into becoming firefighters. And do you think that your time here in New Berlin and your time as an explorer, do you think that shaped how you taught them?
100%. Yeah.
Because I know you brought up a point one time. It was you and Andy Wilkie, who was also our other senior firefighter, standing on top of the tower, standing on the roof of the tower, overlooking the city, and the recruits were having a bad day that day, I think, and you guys had to give them a little schooling, a little education, and I think you made it clear to them that, and I'll let you take it, but you showed them the city, the skyline, and said, that's what we protect.
These are your streets, these are your people. Yeah. This is what your ultimate goal is. And like Mike had said, you develop that bond of community service and stuff. In the city of Milwaukee, it's on a much grander scale, but you're still giving back. You're still contributing to. I had recruits that grew up in impoverished areas of the city and were so looking forward to going and giving back to that part of town, back to the city, back to what they grew up in. And it was instilled here. It was the same thing. Mike had talked about it, about giving back to the community in that retention, recruitment. Why do you want to do this? I want to give back. So it happens at all levels. It happens at the smallest volunteer level. It happens at the biggest jobs.
And I think there's something we mentioned there that you build that sense of community and you build that sense of pride. And in it, comes this idea that you really and truly, sometimes in the fire service, we're very hard on our new recruits and we give them, we pound them into the ground, as they say in the old days, we take their souls and, or we crush their souls, pardon me. And we have to rethink that, and especially now with the way we have our recruitment and our ability to find people that come into this job, is that may not have been the way to go. And I know one of the things you did in the school, Mike, which I thought was wonderful, was that you took that from that pounding, that constant pounding that you guys are, like when I came on, we stood in line and they told us, that we could scratch the belly of an ant because that we're lower than that and we aren't worth anything and we won't be anything until we get out of the school. And then when we get in the firehouse, we won't be anything for 9 months because we'll be a liability to the company on an asset. And we spent over, a year and a half, let's say, of being something other than lower than whale crap. Yep. Something other than a city of Milwaukee firefighter. And I know that you took that out there and you said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to show them that love, that compassion, that desire for this job, for what it is, and truly make a difference. And how many kids went through when you were there?
200, I lose count, 250 something. I think it was 200, 250-ish.
So 250 firefighters have had his tutelage and literally now carry forward that belief and carry forward that attitude that makes the Milwaukee Fire Department, my opinion, I'm biased, best fire department around. But, it's because of that. And how do you said earlier you felt that your time as the explorer in New Berlin changed that. Is there anything else you feel that your time here made that difference? I know that, believe it or not, this guy was skinnier than he is now. And we used to force feed him like 10,000 calories a day to get him to actually get through the academy, because that's how thin he was. He still didn't gain any weight. That's garbage. But anyway, is there something that you feel, something else, a takeaway that you got out of this organization that you took with you?
You don't know what you don't know until you know it. And what I mean by that is coming in that first day and feeling that sense of community. And then I left because of where I lived in the city. When I became a trainee, I went to Station 2. So the rig you saw in the earlier episode, 604, was my first rig, the first rig I was ever assigned to, and Jim Liska was my first boss. So I had experience with you guys, and then I went to that dynamic. And let's face it, there was some camaraderie, if you will, between firehouses, some spirited camaraderie between firehouses back in the day.
We didn't like any of them. There was one firehouse. It was Station 5. The rest of them were just wannabes.
They were wannabes. But I'm leaving that culture. I'm leaving that dynamic, and I'm going into a whole other world. And I didn't know it at the time, but that forced me to come up with an understanding. So when I got into my professional career, switching firehouses, working with people I may not care for the day, how do you navigate those waters? I didn't know that at the time, but I was learning a tremendous life lesson going from that, from where I started as an explorer to a trainee. And then I went back to Station 5 again. So now you get the other dynamic. I came back as a boss. So now you get that other dynamic of, so I learned a lot about how to transverse personnel dynamics and stuff. I wouldn't have known that at the time. I wouldn't have guessed that at the time. You don't know what you don't know. But I think that was a big part of it. But it taught me how the ability to get along with and to deal with and what to fight and what not to deflect some of that stuff. You're going to get some garbage. People are going to work on you. You know what? If that doesn't mean anything. Deal with the important stuff. So I think that was unique in my abilities from traveling amongst the firehouses in New Berlin. Would be one of the unique things. But I'll go back to what I said earlier. Instilling right off the bat the love of the job, and falling in love with the job. If you can get someone to fall in love with the job early, you've got them. They'll stay. How you foster that, develop that culture, that's a whole other podcast, probably 2 or 3. But you guys were able to capture us. Kolmasar, who's not here, Ricky Tazala went on to be, we can go through the list of people that were explorers that went on to be paid professional firefighters because that was instilled. You got them to fall in love with the job early. Did you bust our balls occasionally? Absolutely. Did we deserve some of it? Yep, absolutely. Were there teaching moments in there? Yes. Again, you don't know what you don't know at the time, but you get them to fall in love with the job early. And I could never see myself do it. Nathan's doing it. Our oldest son is doing it. He's in the Milwaukee Cadet program right now. And I think part of that is because he saw all the stories, and the stories I brought home, I got him to fall in love with the job early. And I think that is the key, especially from a retention side of it. If you've got an Explorer program or you've got a Junior Fire Institute, go back to Milwaukee. So many of the kids that were students, recruits, came through the JFI program. They got them to, Jeff Gauthier and now Joey Hayes, got them to fall in love with the job early, and that's, I think that's the key. That's what you instilled in me that much, and that carried into what I tried to teach. That's how I tried to represent. There is a serious side of it. There are things you need to learn. There's skills involved. There's some strength involved. There's some, everything else you talked about before. But if you love the job, talk to anybody who serves. You get lifelong service members, Marines, Air Force, Navy. Why do they do it? They love the job. I think that's what you instilled in me. Was one of the biggest.
It's interesting because that's a lot to unpack, because the reality is, first off, as a young man, to see the concept that, like I said in the first episode, there are people there that aren't on your path, but they're still just as valuable. Mm-hmm. And to go from, a camaraderie in one firehouse to a very institutional camaraderie in another, and then come on to the city of Milwaukee, and all those dynamics, to take all of that and realize that there is a difference. There's a difference in all of us, and it doesn't mean somebody is less valuable. They're important to the system. So yeah, obviously moving firehouse to firehouse gave you a lot of things to understand as a young man, and so on and so forth. And I look and I think that as I said earlier in episode 1, I spent most of my time, my younger years at Station 5, which was the place. I happened to maybe get in a disagreement with the fire chief, which I was known to do at the time. I was pretty much known to do that most of my career. Ironically, then I became one. However, I was moved to Station 1 and assigned to Engine 2 there. And I remember clearly I had such a, I don't want to call it a disdain, but I really didn't like that place. And then I look and then ended up becoming a captain at Station 2 with Engine 4 here. And and then going back to Station 5. But the thing I took away from that now as an adult, as a senior, I know it sounds funny, but as an adult, with adult thinking, was that, again, every group was different, yet we were all part of the whole, and we all served for the whole. And when I had lunch with some of those guys a while ago, and I asked them about it, and they said, you know what? We just did our thing. And I had great respect for that crew, that captain. And then the people were there. I look back and say, yeah, they were doing the same thing we were doing. They just had a different way to get there. Yeah. And that was huge. That really was huge. And that's part of the maturity that comes along as you get a little older and you realize, I thought those guys were fools because they did something different, or they weren't as into the job as I was.
But they were. I mean, some of those guys were. You take a Leo Borelli or some of those old schoolers, they were the job.
Yeah, they were the job.
But we looked at them different. So,
correct. Yeah. Correct. So, Mike, I really appreciate you coming today. Absolutely. I thank you very much. And again, take a look. Go back to one of the old episodes. You'll see this guy is going to teach you a lot about being a senior firefighter. One of the first. Yeah. And that brings us to Steve Conn. Steve, thank you for being here today. I really appreciate it. Steve happened to be here today. He was donating his helmet to the museum. And I snagged him and said, come on in, I want you to be part of this. Because Steve has a very interesting path. You started in West Milwaukee with what I call the Lisketeers, with the intern program.
Yes, I was a Lisketeer, and I was in the exact same class as Mike Medrano, who spoke earlier. And my path was started there by a firefighter that was also a Lisketeer before me. And I decided it seemed kind of interesting at the time that the fire service might be something I'd be interested in. And that firefighter was Dan Berghofer, who worked a career in the city of Waukesha Fire Department.
Okay, yeah, that's familiar. So that took you from there to New Berlin as a volunteer?
Yes, unfortunately, I didn't have as fast a path as Mike Bongiorno, but I was doing some odd jobs, working jobs, and my career kind of hit a snag. We all face our problems early in life, and I'm glad that I faced my problem early in life, because if it would have happened later in life, I don't think I would have been a firefighter. But I started a little bit later. I started in '95 on the volunteer department. So I wanted to start earlier. Unfortunately, I couldn't. But I basically had to almost beg, borrow, and steal two chiefs removed from your father, Chief Robotsky, to try to get him to let me be on the department as a volunteer, even though I was living across 108th Street in West Dallas. Mm-hmm. So I did not live in the city of New Berlin, which was one of the requirements at the time, that you had to be a city resident to volunteer. I knew there were some exceptions of guys that were looking to do this as a career, and basically went in and talked to Chief Robotsky, and he allowed me to join the New Berlin Volunteer Fire Department.
So you then went from the West Milwaukee program into the New Berlin Volunteer Fire Department.
Yes.
And were there when they transitioned over to the New Berlin Fire Department.
Yes, I went from the volunteer organization. I actually was at Station 5 with some of the other guys. Actually, Mike Weiss taught me a lot of things at Station 5 when I came in as a rookie. And then in 2000, we transitioned to a municipal department. And when it was a municipal department, I, at the time, was working. I got hired actually off the volunteer department in the city of West Dallas. I spent 11 years with the city of West Dallas, but I kept my roots in New Berlin, because when I started at Station 5, I realized that there was a level of excellence that would have rivaled any full-time department in a volunteer organization. I said, if I hang around here long enough, I think this is going to set me up to be a career firefighter. Mm-hmm. And eventually it did. But I stayed around the New Berlin the City of New Berlin organization long enough that I was allowed to come back in a part-time capacity as a fire inspector, and then I kind of mentored under Assistant Chief Fred Schultz as he was the assistant chief in charge of fire prevention and inspection. And that's kind of the path my career kind of took from there.
It's funny. I think Mike Medrano was a fire inspector, if I remember correctly, with the city of New Berlin. So you ended up then, the department went municipal, and then it became career. They started hiring career people.
Yep.
And you did your entire career there and retired as an assistant chief?
That is correct. I left West Dallas, came back here. I took a position as the assistant chief in charge of fire prevention and inspection, as well as the assistant chief's positions here were also a shift commander, or what most paid departments call them, battalion chiefs. So basically ran a shift, ran a bureau, and spent almost 14 years here as an assistant chief in charge of a shift and in charge of a bureau.
So you had your time in West Dallas, 14 years?
11 years.
11 years?
11 years.
And then 14 here in New Berlin?
Yeah, so 25 total, retired just at the end of 24.
Yeah. And so tell me what it was like. Give me the understanding of what you were there when it was volunteer. You saw it go municipal. You were a career firefighter.
Right.
And yet you watched this department transition from what once was a gloried, a well-respected volunteer organization into a career fire department. What was that transition like?
So
how tough was that? Because I know there was some really bad blood at times.
essentially, when you bring somebody in from an organization that doesn't have an understanding of what it means to volunteer your time and what blood, sweat, and tears and the sacrifices that those that came way before me and even before you,
Absolutely.
These guys were the trendsetters on starting up an organization that was non-existent and building it to a, like I said earlier, an organization that demanded excellence and demanded that even though they were volunteer, they should provide the exact same excellent service that any of your big city fire departments would offer. And I think when somebody isn't part of that, it's like if you're not part of a championship football team and somebody says, well, how did they get to be a championship? You'll never understand it unless you're part of it. Mm-hmm. And when you're part of an excellent organization, you understand what that excellence takes to stay at that high level. And that transition at times was good, and at times it was not so good, in that there were a lot of good people that did not stay around. And when we started losing people that gave of their time freely, we lost a lot of that excellence that I think Mike Weiss kind of spoke to it, that you can kind of push it forward to the next group coming through, that you can give the new recruits an understanding on what we're trying to accomplish here. And I think that was lost for a little while. I think when you had people coming in that don't have an understanding of what that organization was about before, you kind of lose that. And when I came back, I was looking to try to bring that back.
Yeah, there definitely was a time where the management was very, they had their own idea how they wanted to run things,
right.
How they wanted to do things. And they intentionally took a lot of what was in the volunteer era and literally disposed of it and said, we're not going to have that. I think they felt they wanted to be something different. So they forced, this is our view and this is our belief. And kind of, in the days when, even in maybe Nazi Germany, where they came along, and I'm not putting the two together at all, but I just mean that when you want to change a culture, the easiest way to do it is literally throw out the old culture.
Right, and that's kind of what happened. And fortunately there were individuals like Jim Liska and some other people that were bending, but they weren't going to break to it.
Sure.
And we wanted to try to maintain that excellent culture that was started originally, that your dad instilled, that guys like you instilled upon everybody, and Mike Weiss and Mike Medrano, and we wanted to maintain that level of excellence.
Well, I think you certainly did. I think that I will say this. I will say that I was at his retirement party, And I told the who's your union president now?
Nick Fisher.
I said, Nick, I went to your retirement, Steve's retirement, and I said, I just want you to know, and I says, please let all your members know this. Let everybody that's part of the New Berlin Fire Department be aware of this. That seeing fully staffed companies, seeing a fully staffed ladder company and a fully staffed engine companies come by to your retirement to pay their respects. I said, my father would be smiling ear to ear, because what he started as an organization, and there's a picture here of literally a bunch of guys sitting around having a couple of beers doing what they thought was right for the community, that has transformed itself into a truly professional, well-run, well-operated fire department. And it is exactly what the citizens of New Berlin deserve. And it is great to know that it went from this in 1954 up to what it is now. And you were fortunate, Steve, to have that part of a lot of it.
And to kind of piggyback on what you just said with that, I would say that those guys that were standing at attention, my greatest feeling was that we finally hit that career goal. I mean, that career goal was long overdue. It was being talked about for 20 to 25 years. And I don't want to seem kind of selfish, but it felt very fulfilling to be able to retire from a career department.
Absolutely.
And I would agree with you. It's what the citizens deserve. And it was a great run. It was a great run to run with guys like you as a volunteer, and to go through the transition and to finally retire and see that right now it's in very good hands.
Absolutely. Well, Steve, I thank you for your time. I thank you for being part of the podcast today, and I'm glad I caught you.
All right.
So with that, I just want to wrap everything up and say I want to thank all of our guests, and I want to thank Jim for opening up the museum to us and giving us an insight into what the New Berlin Fire Department looked like then and now. And I really want to let people know that there are many takeaways from this. If you really look at the podcast and see, there are things of individuals are different. People volunteer for certain reasons than others. We have all these different reasons why we do what we do. But the reality is this: when it comes down to it, every person I interview here today and everybody that steps forward to be a law enforcement officer or to be a firefighter does it because they care about their community and does it because they care about their fellow man. And that's what we have to really understand. And we have to look at this in the concept that when you join the fire department, when you join the police department, when you join the military, you're no longer you. It is no longer about you. It is no longer about your concerns. It's no longer about your wants. What it's about is providing and giving back and looking out for your fellow man. And the reality is, sometimes we do that at the cost of our own lives. But that's part of being a team. That's part of being a group. We can't have individualism within the fire service, within the public protection, within the military. That stuff has to go away. It has to be a team. It has to be a group effort, because nothing gets done as an individual. So with that, from the podcast, from the New Berlin Volunteer Fire Department Museum, to all of our listeners from Beyond the Shield, I thank you for watching today. I hope you got something out of it. And until next time, God bless.